So, a little while ago I participated in the Gmtk game jam, which is the biggest game jam that has been held until this day. This game jam took place over one weekend, which was 48 hours. On Friday evening the theme got announced, which was Join Together. Quickly I started brainstorming and came up with the following idea. I wanted to make a top-down shooter, because those are fairly easy to make, and since I only have 48 hours this is just perfect. You are joined together with a turret you can place. Between you and the turret is a tether that instantly kills enemies and projectiles. The turret auto-fires and you can only fire when your turret is active, and the turret can overheat, after which it retracts, and then it needs to be cooled down. Last game jam, which was Legendary, I mainly focused on the art and the mood of the game, but this game jam I really wanted to make a game that feels like a lot of fun. And of course the best way to do this is to add some really nice game feel or some game juice, which makes the game feel really polished. So first up, let's start making this game without adding any game feel. So basically the complete base of the game. So I finally got the base game actually done, and I did a couple of changes to what I said before for the mechanics. I decided to add a shockwave upon placing the turret and when the turret retracts, and this shockwave pushes back enemies, and if these enemies then get knocked into the terrain they will die. The shockwave also destroys projectiles, and next to that I decided to have a clear end to the game with a boss fight, something that I always appreciate in game jams over an infinite mode. So that was the base game, but of course it lacks the most important part of the game, which is the game juice. So obviously, as you can see, I'm just using basic shapes and I'm not gonna have the time to add proper art, but there are of course a couple small techniques that I can use to make the game look a lot more visually appealing with just a couple simple tricks. I added 2D lights to objects that require extra attention and a bloom as post-processing effect to make the colors pop a little bit more. Next to that I added a small vignette effect when the player takes damage. Particles are really important for game feel, as they can be used to indicate when a collision happens, for example. I added particles to bullet impact and whenever an enemy dies. Although particles are absolutely awesome, I say to use them sparingly so it's not too distracting. Also I added a couple slight subtle lightning particles on the tether to showcase that the tether can deal damage. A screen shake just feels so good, but just like everything else, don't overdo it. I've added a subtle screen shake to whenever the player or the turret is shooting. Next to that I added a bit more screen shake on things like enemies dying, taking damage, placing and retracting the turret, and clearing a stage. For this it's actually nice to add an option for the player to turn the screen shake down, just by the use of a simple slider that will multiply it by the amount of screen shake. This of course because everyone has their own interpretation of what an acceptable amount of screen shake is. I didn't have the time to add this option to this game, but I do have it in my main game Adventure of Tug. Speaking of Adventure of Tug, wishlist Adventure of Tug on Steam if you haven't yet. An enemy hit frame is quite important in my opinion to just showcase you when an enemy has taken damage. It's very easy to implement and I highly suggest doing so because getting feedback of when an enemy is getting hit is quite important. I did this by simply changing the material from an enemy to a white material and resetting this material back a half a second later. So as we can see, a lot of the game feel or the game juice is getting clear visual feedback from the game. Squash and stretch is a nice way to showcase that a force has been applied to an object. The only place I was able to add this in this game is on the boss when it hits the terrain. This just makes the impacts into the terrain feel more powerful. Finally, the last thing I added is sound. Because what is a game without sound? I am by no means an expert when it gets to sound design, but managed to get a bunch of compliments on this. For this I used the sound library phrasesound.org and used a sound effect tool called BFXR. I adjusted these sounds slightly in Audacity and of course changed the volume on sound effects, which were a bit too loud, to make the volume of each sound effect within a certain volume range. Next to that I made sure the sound effects have a 3D effect to them and they are softer the further away a sound effect takes place. For example, on the bullet impacts I have a sound effect, and there are of course a lot of bullets flying around, so with this 3D effect I made sure that the player doesn't get overwhelmed too much by the sound. Next to the sound effects, it is also important to add background music. For this I use a tool called Accurate Music, which makes music using AI. For this game I got more of a sci-fi cyber techno feeling, so that's the type of music I went for and it fits perfectly. Of course, next to all these techniques I've used to add game feel, there are a lot more techniques available. And then the results for the Gmtk game jam have also come in already, and out of the total of 5,801 entries, I managed to score rank 199 in the fun category, which is of course the category I focus on. So as we can see, it went from a simple top-down shooter with a neat little mechanic to a very fun game that feels amazing with just a couple simple techniques that anyone could implement into their own game with ease. If you would like to play the game, then you can, the link is in the description, and feel free to leave a comment on the video what you think of the game. Thank you for watching my video. I appreciate everyone that has subscribed to me, left likes on my videos, and of course I love reading your comments. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even learn a thing. Hopefully see you soon again in my next video.